For a little while now, there have been these rumours of a potential fight between Terence Crawford and Chris Eubank Jr. And I figured, as I like to do, I'd chuck my hat into the ring, give my 2 cents on this weird potential fight between these two. And yeah, that's probably the best word I can use to describe it. Is weird, it's strange, it's odd. Because elephant in the room being that these guys are supposedly trained by the same guy currently, Brian McIntyre, aka Bomac, the Skeng Man. Um, and I have seen in the past day there is an interview with Bomac. I think it was done by the Boxing Voice, and he says it's fake news. Okay, fair enough. He's an insider. I'm sure he knows what he's talking about. However, he then goes on to basically say that the main barrier to this fight happening is finance. You know, it's financial, it's money. He doesn't feel there's any money in it, and yeah, I mean that's a bit of a chin scratcher because you're just thinking, okay, so it's not about you guys, these two guys being in the same stable. It's more about the money, which is a separate discussion itself. I'm not going to go through the the financial money making potential of this fight, but I want to explore it because I feel like it exemplifies the weird situation that both guys are in regarding their respective careers. Because if you look at the two of them, they've both just come off career-defining wins. Of course, Terence Crawford became undisputed back in July, handing Errol Spence the arse whooping of a lifetime. And I guess you could say the same thing about Eubank Jr. against Liam Smith, just minus the undisputed crown. Um, and those are certainly top level wins. As I say, those are career defining, and it's just like, all right, what's next? Both guys are, I feel, becoming stagnant. They're just completely losing all the momentum that they would have gained from those last couple of fights, respectively, and it's just fizzling out. And now there's talks of them fighting each other. And of course, we know that with Eubank Jr., it's not the first time he's had um, this kind of potential excursion in his career, because there was a Conor Ben saga, which was really weird in its own right. Because Eubank Jr., I think it's fair to say he still has a lot to prove in his career if he hopes to cement his legacy as a top flight, all time great middleweight, or at least a notable middleweight. He's still hasn't become a legitimate champion. And I say that with the greatest deal of respect because, I'll be the first to give Eubank Jr. credit for his last fight, that performance in a rematch against Liam Smith, because yes, Liam Smith, you could make the argument, is tailor-made for Eubank Jr., but don't underestimate the kind of psychological demons that a fighter has to overcome in that kind of situation where you're rematching a guy who a few months ago completely starched you. And the way Eubank Jr. performed, you wouldn't have thought that happened. So major props, major credit to Eubank Jr. for that. But it seems like these days he's relatively risk averse and he's just trying to maximize reward. And look, he's not a champion, so he can do what he wants. It's not like he's going to hold up the division. But I think it doesn't take away from how questionable certain things may be. Because I'm sure you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't Eubank Jr. appeal, if that's the right word, the WBO's decision to make him mandatory for Janibek? And Janibek, we now know, is a unified champion. So if Eubank Jr. was interested in belts and legacy, well, yeah, it's a risky fight and it's low reward financially. But if you believe in yourself, you'd see it as an opportunity to win 2 belts in one. But obviously he doesn't seem too keen on fighting Janibek and would rather fight Terence Crawford, Conor Ben for a shed load of money. Obviously both being welterweights. It's just really odd. It's strange form from Eubank Jr. and it makes you question, what is he really fighting for these days? As I say, he's not a champion, so he can fight for whatever he wants for all I care, because he's not going to be depriving anyone of their well-deserved title shot because he's not a champion, doesn't hold up the division or anything. But then there's Terence Crawford as well. Now, Terence Crawford, I think, is a fantastic fighter. I think he's a true modern day elite. I think he's going to go down as an all-time great. And personally, he's one of my favourite fighters to watch. However, I'm not going to let that cloud my judgment, because Terence Crawford has some unfinished business at welterweight. And that is despite being undisputed, because there is a man named Jaron Ennis who is very keen, it seems, chomping at the bit, you could say, to fight Terence Crawford. Now, this is not about whether you think Terence Crawford wins or loses against Jaron Ennis. It's not the point. The point is that Terence Crawford has a good legacy so far, a great legacy, some may say. But as I say, there is that unfinished business. There is another challenger at welterweight. And if he doesn't fight him, I personally would be massively disappointed, because I think stylistically it's going to make for quite an intriguing fight, because Jaron Ennis is a very good fighter in his own right. I think he's one of the few fighters active now who can match Terence Crawford for athleticism. And I think that alone is enough interest. That's an interesting enough dynamic for me to want to tune in, and I'm sure many of you guys will agree. The only thing that would be a viable excuse, in my opinion, is if Terence Crawford moved up to light middleweight or middleweight and fought one of the top flight guys there. Like if he moved up to light middleweight and fought Tim Tszyu, if he went up to middleweight and fought Janibek himself rather than Eubank Jr., I'd say, okay, I can't really grumble. I can't hold it against you for not fighting Jaron Ennis. But other than that, anyone else, nah, I don't think that's good enough. And I know there are probably going to be some Bud fanboys who are just like, oh, he's undisputed. He beat Errol Spence. He's the man. He doesn't have to prove himself. Well, look at the fighters of yesteryear. A lot of them became unified, undisputed, were seen at the top of the division. They hung around for a little bit to test themselves against the next mandatory or the next up-and-coming fighter. And if they did that and they're considered great, I think it's only fair that we hold Terence Crawford to that same standard, especially if he wants to be held in the conversation for an all-time great or the greatest of all time. So yeah, it's quite disappointing, like in the short medium term, to see what these two guys, Chris Eubank Jr. and Bud Crawford, are doing now, because they just seem to be fizzling out and losing the momentum from their last performances, which were really good. But yeah, I guess we'll see what happens. This might all just be needless chat, and their fights get announced next week, and Eubank Jr.'s fighting Janibek and Bud Crawford's fighting Jaron Ennis, although I'm not going to hold my breath, but you know, boxing is an ever-changing landscape. But did I have anything else I want to say? Yeah, weird situation, weird potential fight. I don't really want this to happen. I don't want to see this. I'd rather see these two guys fight the other names that I've mentioned respectively. But let me know what you think. That's just my opinion. You guys might have a different one. You might be loving the idea of this fight and hope that happens. But leave your thoughts down below and I shall get back to you. But for now, thanks for listening, and I'll catch you on the next video.